This is Colin Dixon with nScreenMedia, and I'm at OTT TV World Summit in London, and I'm speaking with Gene Hoffman, who is CEO of Vindicia. Gene, you gave a very interesting presentation at the show just now. One of the things that you said that particularly resonated with me was you said don't train your customers to steal your content. Talk about that a little bit, because that was a very interesting point.
Well, one of the most frustrating things I hear from various folks who are launching these services or are thinking about a content strategy kind of globally is, well, we're going to window this and not make it available in this region, or we're going to not make it available yet. And the answer is, whenever you're saying that, you should replace it with, we're going to hand it over to the pirates and make sure that they make it available instead. And what's so troubling about it is that pricing is usually your magic bullet to kind of do this. If you feel like you can't, for whatever licensing reasons or whatever, make it available in this current territory, price it up, because what you want to do is take the people most dedicated and make sure you're not training them to pirate it in the first place.
So when you say price it up, how much flexibility do you get there?
I think you have quite a bit, because as long as you actually make it available, you can make it 2-3 times what people expect it to be, because that window is so open and new. If the BBC were to window Sherlock into the United States that way, it would never hurt their downstream ability to license in those other windows, because it would have been like, $30 to watch, the first episode. Most people aren't going to do that, but some will, and those are exactly who you don't want to train to pirate it.
Now, another point you made was that there is a minimum amount you should charge. You mentioned £4 or £5. Say why there is that minimum, and it doesn't matter what period or what you're buying, right? There's a minimum amount.
Yeah, this is an after effect of the Visa, MasterCard, American Express networks globally. The way credit and debit cards are priced, you have a minimum sit rate plus a percentage rate of the total transaction take. And so the closer you get to like £1 or $1, the much larger as a percentage that total take is. Up to even 25% of a dollar transaction. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, that's not the real driver. The real driver is once you model an amount of sales at, say, £4, and the number of chargebacks you're naturally going to get. You're always going to get somewhere between like 0.3% and even as much as 0.8% of all your transactions back. Well, each chargeback has a chargeback fee in the neighborhood of at minimum £3-4, and often as much as £7-8 per. So not only do you end up losing when the chargeback happens, this is a forced refund from the issuing bank from that consumer, you don't just lose the refund, you lose the refund plus the chargeback fee. And so it starts to wipe out other good revenue that you're pricing at the same point. So this is why that minimum exists, in the sense that the underlying fees and costs to actually do business are much higher than it might appear if you just think about it from an initial transaction perspective.
This could be a real impediment for SVOD services, right? Because we're seeing services coming in at $4.99, some $2.99. What you're saying is that they could end up losing money just through chargebacks.
That's right. $2.99 is a very dangerous price point, where you're really cutting into your margins very specifically, because your average chargeback costs you 3 customer months or 4 customer months worth of revenue. At least at $4.99, you're in a place where if you negotiate your terms with your payment processors right, you can still basically make it work and only have the chargeback rate kind of be like 2x the refund rate, if that makes any sense. So that's the good news. But the flip side of all of this is time. If you're sitting there fighting $2.99 a month, well, how about doing $6.99 a quarter? There are other ways to get at that same problem that then, skip away from the underlying economic issues of the payment infrastructure.
Yeah. Another point you made, which I think is such a good point, it's about this idea of making it difficult to cancel out of fear. Explain why that is such a bad idea if you're trying to launch an OTT service.
Well, this is one of my favorite things to point out to folks. A lot of marketers, you focus so much on acquiring your initial subscribers, and you're like, oh my God, if they don't stay, I'm going to get fired. And it's all fear-driven. But the problem is that, in fact, you're asking people to change their behaviors, you're asking them to adopt a whole new way of doing something, making it really easy for them to opt out when you don't have the be-all, end-all service, or, no matter how good it is, it's still the best answer, because what you do is you poll them about why they're leaving. And now that list becomes the core go-to way, as you make those enhancements that address the issues they had that led them leave, to reacquire them. Someone put it well, as we were chatting earlier, you're not a subscriber, you're just on pause. And when you make it that easy, what happens is it becomes very, very easy to go back to that subscriber and say, hey, look, that service issue you had, we've dealt with that. You should try it out again, maybe even for another free month. Again, this is back to the fear thing. People are like, I can't give them another free month. Well, yeah, absolutely you can, because if you can build that trust, you become the trusted provider, you entertain them in the way that your brand wishes to entertain them, and they become, as an overall subscriber lifetime value, extremely long.
Yeah, it's so counterintuitive, though, isn't it?
So much of subscription is very counterintuitive. The best way to acquire the most subscribers is to let them go easily.
Yeah. Well, Gene, this has been great. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Colin, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been Colin Dixon with nScreenMedia.